Hey, Samika. Mana?
Hey, Nelson.
Hey, Samika.
Hey, I'm going out, so I'm gonna log in there already, but I'll say hi.
Sounds good. Thanks.
妹妹哈
OK， 我去吧。
我眼睛找不到，太阳眼睛。
没问题的。好，那咪吗？拜。
OK。如果你没事情就下来陪。
知道了，好。
Hey, Nelson, did you want me to help with adding the people in?
Yes, please. I would
Okay.
greatly appreciate that.
Wait, I think you're gonna have to add me as co-host to add people in.
Oh, oops.
Yep.
Okay. Let me get you as a co-host. Does it work?
Yep, that works.
Perfect. Ah? Huh? 其他人冇吃到啊？
怎么会没有呢？有个头嘛。
哦，我已经先到了，刚那
车上面吗？
在车上面的，你手靠你地方去，手影去点唔好先哦。反正那个 cabinet 下机啊都看得到。All right, we'll start 5 minutes after, so we grab some water. All right, for everyone who wants to follow along, I'm going to throw the link to the Excel sheet that I use for underwriting large apartment complexes. So I'm just going to throw this in the chat. Oh, no, that's not the chat. How do I throw this in the chat? There we go. If you guys ever want to use it, just make a copy and then, you know, just hopefully don't overwrite the stuff I already got on there. But this is an example of an actual project that we raised for, and we got pretty much the funding we needed immediately for it. So this is like an example of a good deal. You won't find these very easily right now. I think I've underwritten like close to somewhere between 50 and 100 so far, somewhere in Chicago alone. So $1,500. No, 50 to 100, not 1,500. No, I'm not that crazy. I would have given up probably around 200. I want to say. I would have never gone all the way to 1,500 though. You know. We'll give it 2 more minutes before I start. While we're waiting, how's anyone got any exciting news in the new year? Anybody actually finished the 30 days to buy a home challenge? Besides me, I got some under contract. I think Annie also got something under contract. Anyone else buy anything? All right, or not.
Well, technically I cheated because I had a contract and then I decided to do this 30-day thing for everyone. So,
That's
haha.
true. Yeah, unfair advantage.
Exactly.
We set up a book club. That's exciting.
That's exciting too. Yeah, good moves, George. I hope everyone's hopping in on that soon.
I'm surprised. I thought it was going to be the 4 of us.
Yeah, like no one reads anymore. What are you doing, nerds?
Yeah, hey, nice meeting you all. I'm Daniel. I put in an offer for an investment property in Austin, and hopefully we'll close in a month.
Nice, congrats.
Nice.
Thanks.
What are you getting out there?
Yeah.
I'm actually investing in a single-family home in Leander, which is about, I think, 30 minutes north of Austin.
Yep.
This is my first investment property, and so like I'm kind of getting into the game now.
Yeah. Leander's
Very cool.
crazy. Yeah, people are buying lots that are like an acre.
Yo, Nelson, you wearing glasses?
Your glasses, yeah. I like whenever I do my actual job, which is a programmer, I sit at a screen for like 8-9 hours a day. So I need these like computer glasses to not hate myself.
I love it, man. I love it.
Appreciate
I
it.
feel you, Nelson. I have computer glasses too. The only time I ever wear them.
All right, let's get started. So this is class 5. We're talking about underwriting apartment complexes. This is a little different. Pretty much, we went through a cram course series of 4 classes for how to start buying your own. This is about what you're going to do if you either want to be the person who buys these large apartment complexes, or if you're investing in someone else who's going over these apartment complexes. Apartments are a lot harder to underwrite. There's just a lot more moving parts, and you're just bombarded by a lot of things. So I'm going to try to segment this as much as I can. And I know this is going to be very difficult to show just to a presentation alone. So I'm going to be switching back and forth between screens and what the numbers actually look like, right? So I mentioned this earlier, but this is an example of a project that we actually just raised money for. And, we blew out, the amount of equity that we actually needed. So This is an example of a good deal that people are interested in, and even like Chicago, where no one really like cares about Chicago. And hopefully I can show you guys like what to look for in your own deals and how to find them in the future. Because for this project, I was saying earlier, I underwrote probably like somewhere between 50 and 100 apartments already in Chicago. So like it takes a while to find something that's worthwhile. Okay, so underwriting apartments, I'm going to get started. The most basic way to think about it is there's two components when you get to a size that's more commercial, and you care now about your sales profit, which most people usually do, right? They think like my house is going to go up from $100 today to be like $1,000 tomorrow, right? That's where most of the income comes from. But now you actually have to really worry about your rental profit. Loans in the commercial side are very different. Rates will sometimes be higher. You have to worry about balloon payments at the end. It's very difficult in commercial to get the same like 30-year fixed rate loans. You're usually presented with a bigger obstacle where the rates will change over time. And that's largely because with apartment complexes, it's very dependent on how much rental income that a project makes. If you don't at least break even with your rental profit, you're not only going to not be able to make money on it, most lenders won't actually want to lend for this project. Unless they're like evil and they give you a super high interest rate just so they can take the property back once you fail. So that's like a whole nother story. But basically, you're not going to be the only person that underwrites these projects. You will then eventually have to show these projects to the lender. And these people are also analysts. They work with commercial all the time. They probably underwrite more than I have because that's their actual day job. And so they're also going to be a third party between you and the seller to make sure that this deal works. So if you guys have a bunch of cash, don't just throw it all in there. So quick terms to understand. In order to calculate sales price, you're going to need to understand what NOI means. NOI is your net operating income. That's the total actual income. That's rent plus laundry machine minus all your expenses that don't include the loan. I'm sorry, my dog is barking really loud. Let me go deal with that afterwards. But essentially, you have a total annual income minus your total annual expenses, but you don't want to include the loan because the loan will be different between everyone. In commercial loans, there's a lot more, it's a lot more subjective. So your lenders will actually give you higher or lower rates depending on how many other apartment complexes you've run in the past, right? That's why it's very difficult to break into commercial unless you partner with somebody who already has some track experience to get you those better loan terms. You also want to know what cap rate is. That's your capitalization rate. This changes based on your city and your class. So this is what I was talking about earlier. I'm going to start bouncing back and forth between different maps. But so, for example, I'm in Chicago, and Chicago here has a multifamily that is infill, which means it's in the city, and I'm in a Class B neighborhood for this property, right? So in Chicago, the average cap rate is around a 5.75%. However, I wanted to be conservative. So on my Excel sheet here, and every Excel is going to be different. You should really know yours in and out. I'm going to put my exit cap rate. I'm just go straight to it. On this Excel sheet, the only things you can really change are on the dashboard. My exit cap rate is right here. It is 6.25%. Why did I go higher? Because cap rates, although they've gone down in the last 10 years, you want to be conservative, and you might be worried like, okay, what if it goes higher in the future? Because then you'd be screwed, right? You want to make sure your exit price works at a cap rate that isn't just projecting that it's going to go up forever. You want it to adjust to what it actually is. Now, this cap rate and combined with the actual net operating income is how I get the value of my whole property. Unlike with normal residential real estate, people will buy a home because they're like, I love the way this house looks. I love how beautiful it is. And I want this school district, etc. With commercial real estate, it's entirely dependent on the amount of income that you generate. The cap rate will be pretty much similar within the same area for the same class for the type of property. What that means is if you have your neighbor's apartment complex down the street and they have an NOI and they sold it at this cap rate, you can use that and you get a general idea of what the cap rate should be in that neighborhood. And all you have to do is increase your NOI. And every time your income increases for that property, your property like shoots up in value. So for example, say I end up on this property, it's exit NOI of $180,000, right? Say I decide to put in some new laundry machines and I get an extra $10,000 out. So when I get that extra 10,000 in income, assuming all my other expenses stay the same, I take that 10,000 and then I divide it by my cap rate, which is 0.06%. So I've increased the value of my property when I sell it by $166,000, right? It's not just the income that I generate each month now, the whole value of the property goes up, which is why a lot of people in commercial real estate talk about doing value adds. Every dollar that you improve on the property is divided by this 0.04%, which essentially is a multiplier of, I think, like 25. If you do 0.04, if you do 0.06, you understand where I'm trying to come from, right? We know numbers. So that is like the big earner when you're done. In the meantime, you want to make sure you have enough income to like pay yourself off, right? So now I'm going to talk about understanding your actual market. These are all parts of understanding what it is you're investing in. You shouldn't just throw money at a syndication because you heard Austin was great. Believe it or not, there's almost no real syndications in Austin that are like value add apartment complexes because the price that you pay for the properties is so much higher than the income that it generates. So as a result, you have to tell somebody, hey, if we're going to do this project, you understand you're not going to get paid out for like 5 years. And that's when we get all of our income, right? Whereas if you invest in the Midwest, like Chicago, it's very dependent on getting this like a cash flow to pay out investors every single month, right? You want your preferred return, which is a value investors get each month that based on the amount of money that they invest with these projects. So I'm going to keep going, but basically you want to understand your market. So the first thing to understand is your market vacancy. You can easily look this up on Google. I won't even bother doing it, but essentially it's around 5% out in Chicago for somebody who runs the property properly. And then you're going to want to take the forecasted rent growth. So usually you can take this from CBRE as well. CBRE is a commercial real estate firm that gives you numbers, but I can sometimes just take it from the past. Rent usually grows at the same rate as inflation, which is around 2%. Anything higher than 4%, you should be careful of because that can mean either the train might slow down one day or somebody is just making that number up. So you never really know until you look at it. I'll show you my method. So here's Fred, Chicago, and this will give me federal level data, right? So no one's BSing me here. And I can just look at this since say 2010. Oh, in case someone's didn't realize, rent just always goes up unless you're in San Francisco. But like throughout history, you see this is the Great Recession. If you project it all the way out, this was a slight bump caused by the 08-09 recession. So that's why if you get properties that cash flow, you're pretty much golden, and it's very difficult for a project like this to go under other than through like fraud and someone cheating you out, or you just buy at the wrong price. So here is the number that I have for today. It's 353. That's November 2020. And I say go back 5 years and I get November, nope, 2015. So that's 309. So 353 divided by 309, that's equal to a total of 14%. And then you guys are going to hate me for this math, but basically I take it to the root of 1/5. So yeah, I forgot a lot of people don't like math, but essentially you're trying to figure out what the increase in percentage each year was over the last 5 years to get you that 1.14% increase, 1.14 multiplier times the rent. This is gonna probably take a few steps to walk through, but essentially you can find a calculator online that says this is the interest increase each year that was given to the property. Long story short is the average increase in Chicago has been around 2.69% year over year. However, I want to be conservative again, and it's the coronavirus. So here I've underwritten rent growth to be 0% for the first year. And this is, you know, I've talked with a lot of people. They think this is actually sort of the bottom for the market for coronavirus rents, and people are going to start moving back to the city now that there's a vaccine. But again, this is what you do when you want to be conservative. And then I projected 2% each year. Expense growth, I put also at 2%. That's essentially what you think inflation is going to be, right? So now that I have forecasted rent growth, you want to check for new construction units. If there's more people moving in than there are construction units that are going to come on market, that's a good chance that your property is going to shoot up in value, right? It's a supply and demand thing. This is also through CBRE. You also want to check the path of gentrification. This is a lot harder to know if you don't actually live on the ground. However, there are ways to check online. I use this app called City Data. So in City Data, I can go and look at, oops, let me pull this over. So right now I'm in Chicago, and this is the area that I'm looking in, right? This is the downtown Chicago area. This is the percent change since the year 2000. On City Data, you can select household income and then select percent change since 2000, and you can see the path of growth, right? It follows along this particular path. Why does it do that? Well, because in Chicago, this is where the metro train line is. Most of the jobs are in the downtown area, which is why when you see the most recent value of the median household income, you'll see that most of the wealth, right, the purple area is concentrated here in the downtown area where the rich people live. The people who can't afford downtown, well, they live in the cheaper areas that are currently gentrifying, and they take the train into the downtown area, right? You can check this for every city that you're going to buy in, but you'll essentially see a path of growth. In Chicago, in the most recent years, most of the north side is actually gentrified already. It's overpriced. So a lot of that growth is now spreading to the west and the south sides along specific areas. So somebody want to say something? Yeah, rent growth is compounding too. Yeah, that's that was a terminology I was trying to use, compounding, not just interest growth. But once you get those values, then you're going to also want to figure out crime. When you're in a major city, you're going to end up encountering a lot of crime in general. So like this is just Chicago. It looks like this on the north side. It looks like this on the south side. The big thing you want to avoid when you're in a major city area, though, is shootings. So most people don't know this, but Chicago is actually gentrifying the south side a lot. Mostly you hear about the shootings. So if this is the downtown area, this is where we're investing. And then really far south, when you search this area, this is the, and of course it doesn't work when I'm trying to use it. Here, let me redo this. So when you're in Chicago, the most dangerous parts are like deep south side, the parts that where the gentrification hasn't reached yet. So when I search this area, you're gonna see like multiple shootings in the same sort of corridors, and you're gonna know like, all right, I can't even find a property manager likely to deal with that, much less like try to make it a rental. So once you leave the guns area, then you'll get to places that are actually rentable, even if they're C-class and harder to manage. So that's what I want to get to. You can also use Trulia. They have a similar map. Great schools in the area that we're investing, they're pretty abysmal, but that's fine because, again, this is why you should know your target market, right? We're renting not the people with families. We're trying to rent the people who have jobs in the downtown area because it's next to the train line. And then in terms of employers, this is Chicago. Almost all the jobs are in the downtown area. It's one of the most diverse markets, and every single Fortune 500 company likely has some sort of satellite office in Chicago, that or they're based in Chicago. This includes Google, this includes Amazon, because the Midwest is a lot cheaper to hire. And one thing about Chicago is if you graduate from a school in the Midwest, no one goes to Detroit, in this giant turd in the middle of America that no one really wants to visit. It's like Chicago is like the one tiny star that people will actually want to live in. So feel free to contradict me, anyone, by the way. This is my experience after living in Chicago for like 2 years now. It's just the people I talk to, I'm like, why would you live in Chicago? Because it's like freezing. There was like a year where we were colder than the Arctic. But they're like, yeah, Cubs or die, and I just don't understand it as somebody who's lived in a real city like New York, but also had sunlight in California. And I don't get why people wouldn't just leave. I feel like it's one of those things where, when you make a mistake and you're instead of admitting you're wrong, you just double down on your mistake. I feel like that's all of Chicago. Like, I don't understand the people who love living there, as like a Californian, but each their own. Okay. So yeah, once you understand the city, like the general area, you're going to want to understand that specific neighborhood. Neighborhoods are going to be different, right? This is why you should know all the crime spots. You should know the median income. You should know your population trends. In the area that we're in, it's 73% renters, right? That really tells us like, this is a place where people aren't owning homes, but they're living there because they're trying to get jobs, right? So when you're working and traveling, single units and 2 bedrooms, they're a lot better than say like a 3 to 4 bedroom, because those are usually for families, right? So that's something to think about. And then unemployment, it's like a C-class area. We know that. And then what are the job growth trends? In the South Side, that's largely the Obama Library and the Tiger Woods Golf Course. So those are the 2 biggest new employers that are coming into town on the South Side. So here comes the part that you're actually getting from other people now. So when you are underwriting deals, you're going to be given 3 specific documents that you will use to essentially project your returns. One is an OM, that's your offering memorandum, and that'll tell you essentially what you need to renovate and the parts that you want to fix. You'll still need to do a walkthrough. It's just that with an OM, you'll get an idea of what this project is supposed to be. So here's an example OM. I'm going to pull it up right here. So this was the portfolio that we purchased from. It's a 66 unit in Bronzeville, right? So the particular property that we bought, they do a lot of the work for you in showing you, hey, these are a lot of the employers in town, right? It's next to an Illinois Institute of Technology, and there's like the CTA train line, right? You can follow that path, and here's like the rental, here's all the properties that they have. When you go down and you look through the pictures, you can pretty much quickly tell, all right, this is the sort of work that it needs to be done. You read the property description and you're like, oh, they use a boiler. I want to split the HVAC. once you get to the bigger apartments, you usually know what it is you want to put into your projects to target the demographic that you're renting to, right? So that's how I got these numbers, right? This is 4520 South Vincennes. This was one of the projects that I underwrote that, we purchased, and we're buying it pretty much with all the equity raised. So that's this, good deal where we saw the project, we walked it, but even before that, we looked through the pictures and we were like, oh, these cabinets, they're outdated. We're going to paint that, those walls, we're probably going to make a better color. And those are, electric heaters. We're fine with that, but, they don't run as long and they're more expensive because electric heating is harder to deal with than versus like a gas heating. So they give us now the other thing that's important, which is an example of the expenses, right? So these are what you're going to find on the T12. A T12 is the last 12 months of expenses that you'll see for a property. That's, gas, property, electric. Yeah, the OM here even states these are from the owner T12 financials. It's written really small font. I don't know if you can see it, but essentially what this means is this is the exact amount that the owner has paid on these expenses in the last year. And from that, you can also tell a lot about the project. But I just want to focus on the OM part right now. When I talk about the T12, I need you to understand that you don't really get a grasp of the numbers until you see enough of these OMs. For example, when I first saw this T12, my first thing that I went to was that the water bill was $22,000. As somebody who's now underwritten 50 of these, this is twice as much as what it should be. And then when we dug deeper, we found out, oh, it's that this person is very far behind on their payments, right? They actually have accrued a lot of expenses and they owe about $10,000 to the city in water that they didn't pay for, right? So that's one place where that $10,000, if we address that, it looks a lot better on our NOI when we sell it, right? And that's that $10,000 that raises the value by 166,000 when we make sure that it's not actually caused by a leak, right? That's how you get your valuations. So the scavenger, that means trash, your garbage, and then they get to the 2-star items. So these are the things that they make up, essentially. You're not going to find management for 5% in the south side of Chicago like this. Even though it's 18 units, it's closer to like 8%, right? And then for janitorial, yeah, I could see 6,000, but I usually go higher. Maintenance repairs at 6,000, but I usually go higher as well based on other projects I've seen in the past. And then cleaning and turnover, it's also 6,000, right? So that is your T12. And from your T12, once you've seen out these numbers, you can sort of become a ninja at detecting, one, what's wrong with this property, and two, how can I make a lot of money from it? And yes, insurance is actually, it's actually this cheap. Chicago prices are very low. That's why. In particular, this property, we got it for 80 grand a unit, and something fixed up and on the market is like close to 200. So we got it at like 40% of the price. So then rent rolls. This is the current rent, and then this is their estimated market rent. While sellers are always going to say that sellers are always going to say the market rent is higher, so they're going to project it to be like 1,300, right? Whereas if you look at the underwriting that I went through a lower number, and it's pretty much a lot lower than the numbers that the agent gave. You don't ever want to use the agent projection because it's usually going to be lower than they actually say. So You can also find what the actual value should be once you look at apartments.com. So when you look in Bronzeville, it's this, it's gets you these valuations based on what the apartments should look like and the same type of bedrooms, right? You can take your rental comparisons and then figure out, right? All these are going for 1,900, for example, for 3 beds. It's higher than most, but you want to go on the low side to make sure you're not over underwriting. So that's why I got this like 1,250 number from. Or sorry, for 3 beds, I got this 1,450 number from, right? I'm significantly under what the market rent should be looking like. So once I get those projections, I keep going down and I figure out how to fill out the rest of the numbers. But essentially, you have an offering memorandum, you have your expenses over the last 12 months and how to fix them, and then you have a rent roll, which is your current list of renters. This will tell you your vacancies, this will tell you who's not paying, and they'll give you an idea of what market rents should look like, but you should be the one who's looking into it yourself. And then you have, finally, you want to figure out all your extra data. So you're going to have loan terms. You're going to want to read through market reports and do all your neighborhood reports as well. And then you get a PM for your to ask for your budgets, expenses, renovation, and you just want to know who's going to be the operator if you're buying from out of state, right? So what I'm going to show here is in this dashboard, I fill out all the brown, like orange parts. So I am putting in my purchase price. I put it the year that's built. That doesn't matter as much, but the investment hold does matter, right? The longer you project it out, you better be getting better returns for that. Then in terms of renovation, that will tell you from now until then, my current rent is, someone must have changed this, but I think this one was like 1,000 earlier. This is what my current rent looks like. This is my renovated rent. If it takes me 3 years to get to that point, then it's going to be like $250 of difference that will be 3 years to build up to get to there, because that's how long the renovation is going to take, right? So I put 3 years here, not because it actually doesn't take 3 years to remodel. We could do it much faster. It's just that this project is actually rent controlled. So we have 2 years of rent control left before we can turn the units and then raise the rents higher. So once that's done, we have an acquisition fees, which we put at 0. Usually you charge an acquisition fee if there's like an agent on the sponsor team and they're the one who probably sourced the deal and they're like, hey, we went through the work, we underwrote a lot of these, and I think we deserve to be paid this acquisition fee. Like it's usually a portion of the purchase price. You also have closing costs because you need to sign title and et cetera. And then you also have financing fees. You end up having to pay for the loans and like have close them. And then nowadays they're going to require an operating fund interest reserve. So what that means is since COVID happened, lenders are going to require you to put an extra 12% of the interest that you have to pay into a bank account. So you need to raise that portion now as well. And that will lower your returns overall because more equity is going to be required. Interior, exterior upgrades. I know I skipped over this very quickly because you need somebody on your construction team that knows the construction prices. If you're that person, great. If you don't, you're going to need a contractor that you trust. Then here comes the stabilized income inputs. So there's loss to lease, there's concessions thereafter. Like these are all numbers that you have to figure out on your own later on. And you won't really know them until you talk to somebody who's a property manager in that area, especially once you're in the commercial size. So for example, vacancies are, I mean, everyone knows what vacancy is. Vacancy after year 1 is a little different. Concessions are going to be what you say when you're trying to get people to lease your apartment, you sometimes give the first month free, right? So that's a concession. And you lose like 1 out of 12 months in terms of your actual pay that you would otherwise get. And that's considered concession. employee units. Sometimes I know in some apartments in Chicago, they give a unit to like the janitor maintenance person and, give them free rent in exchange for, them managing the project. Then there's like model units sometimes for very large, like millions of dollars, 300 unit apartments. You'll have like one unit just to show off to people to be like, this is what it looks like when you live in here. Down units, well, you know what that means. It's kind of like down and it's not usable. And the bad debt year one, bad debt is when you take somebody's security deposit and then things go poorly and then you end up, say, they end up owing you even more money than the security deposit, or they just leave without paying. It's essentially the money that somebody still owes you after they've left. And then RUBS is a system where you bill back utilities to the tenants. This is usually what you use if you haven't separately metered all the utilities. But yeah, so these are the big expenses that you kind of encounter. And then, this is where the sale comes in. Once you fill it out, the only thing that's going to be different, like these are all expenses that you can sort of manage and is comparable from person to person. So you have a payroll, you have a maintenance contract. Like these aren't things that are going to really change that much from person to person, as I mentioned earlier. What is going to change is your acquisition debt terms. Depending on who you are and the people you partner with, your loan can either make or break a deal. So for this project, we got this loan through a partner of ours who is been a managing broker for 2 decades with this company called Cushman & Wakefield. They're one of the bigger commercial real estate firms, but because of his experience and his networking abilities, we were able to get a 3.75% interest rate for something that was like 80% loan to value on the construction as well. So I think half of our costs are also, it was like 80 per unit for the purchase and then 40 a unit for rehab. So it's a lot of construction. It's very rare to get like a low interest rate on something that needs this much work. So the lender can make a huge difference when you're trying to buy these projects. IO months. IO means interest only. Interest only is what you, I should answer chat questions. Interest only is essentially this thing where you purchase the property and then for 1 or 2 years, you don't actually pay any of the amortization. You just pay only the interest part. This will help you with cash flow in the beginning. And as a result, you can make better cash in the beginning. Let's see. I mean, I was kidding about the part. I live in Chicago. It's just cold there. And let's see, is 7 years total investment time frame your estimated max hold? So yeah, 7 years total is the estimated total max hold. So the reason we say this is because we see what happened about 3 train stops north. It essentially doubled in value within 5 years because this area of Bronzeville is just revitalizing so quickly, but we don't know if it will reach it that quickly. And part of it is you don't want to sell at a bad time. You usually want to sell once that neighborhood starts getting hot and you see all this other development coming in. Or if you are in a development, you start seeing people no longer purchasing in your area. They try to buy in the next area. That's when you know it might be time to sell, right? You don't really see your rents going up as much once they've hit a peak. And it's 7 years mainly because we actually refinance in year 5. So you get your equity back. It's just that we think there's a lot more potential in this area, which is why we put it at a 7-year hold. It might even go to 10 years, but it's one of those things where if you lived in Chicago and you see the area, then you would understand that this has a lot of potential to like take it off to the next level, because 3 train stops north, it's just coffee shops and people walking their dogs, and there's a lot of opportunity basically. The reserve is not held only for a year. We actually got a term sheet for 3 years. The reason we took the reserve for only the first year is in 2 years, we would be refinancing out once the rent control ends. And then once rent control ends, we can increase the income that it generates. With the income now increasing, right, that cap rate again. So the property value goes up, and then we can refinance, pay out the investors, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where a lot of this comes in. And then, oh, there's a fight going on in the chats. All right, I'll deal with that later. Let me explain the loan terms, and then once you're done with the loan terms, you guys will essentially understand how to use this Excel sheet. To be refinanced, supplemented, I mean, that's up to you. Debt source, private. Agency loan means it's from the government. These Fannie and Freddie Mae loans will be a lot lower in terms of interest rate, and they're going to be a lot more beneficial. The hard part is your property needs to be like 80% physical, 85% physical capacity, which means if your vacancies are too long, then you won't be able to get this nicer, lower rate interest rates. In order to get those interest rates up, you're going to want to prove that you have a lot of good income coming in. And usually they want to see 2 years of income on this apartment complex. That's why for a lot of these projects, it's like 5 to 7 year holds. You're going to want to prove that, hey, I improved this property, I increased the rents, and then after that, you show 2 years of this stabilized high income, then you like pull out that money, right? So that's why it's going to be like a 7 year estimated max hold. It could end up being 5, it could end up being 10. It's just that whenever people say like 5 for sure, a lot of times they could be selling at the wrong time. They're just trying to sell it because it's what the investor wants, or their limited LP investors want. But sometimes what the limited LP investors want isn't necessarily best for the project, right? They just want as much of their money back as possible. Yeah, floating loan, that means the floating loan is the rate gonna move up and down, right? The spread, current index rate, just like there's a rate that it's based off of. There's like a base rate, and then it moves up and down on the spread based on, say, like LIBOR. Although people are changing that, it's not LIBOR anymore. They're gonna adjust them to different rates. And it makes sense for lenders to do that because usually when things go south, the rates go up. So then the interest rate goes up to adjust for, you know, the risk that the lender took. These aren't the same as the government-backed things that you buy when you have a conventional single-family home. So IO months, that's interest only. Amortization after IO, what that means is you have a fixed interest 30-year loan, right? That's amortized over 30 years. In commercial, sometimes they bring that down to 25, right? They want you to pay more of it and they want to see more cash flow. They're just worried about their risks that they give out because, you know, it's not something you can easily repackage and sell back to the government sometimes. So amortization after IO 360, so that's like over 30 years. The term is 120 months, and let's see. So that so that means 120 months. I have 10 years of the loan, and after 10 years, at the end of it, the lender wants their money back. So before that 10-year point, I need to refinance into a different loan in order to make the money that the previous lender wants to pay him off. Then there's gonna be origination fees. The lender's gonna make you pay to take out the loan. There's gonna be exit fees, especially once you're finished with it. They also charge you on the back end. It's these lenders. I should have been a mortgage lender. Closing costs. There's always closing costs. There's a mortgage recording tax. So that depends on your area. You're going to want to look up your city's mortgage recording tax. It's just the tax that you get charged whenever you take out a loan or when you move properties. So then there's these things called prepayment penalties. I don't want to keep diving too much into it, but basically the lender is taking a risk on you. And since they're not backed the same way by the government, what they want is to maximize the money that they make. So sometimes they will charge you a prepayment penalty if you pay off your loan early, right? They want to take as much of the interest that you owe them as possible. So you want to structure your loan in a way that matches the business plan, not necessarily the best 30-year fixed loan that you would usually do with an apartment, with like a single family home. For what we did, we took out a loan where the prepayment penalty ends after year 3, right? So just in time for us to refinance because now we're no longer rent controlled, and we can increase the rent to what it actually deserves to be, thereby increasing the value of the property, and then pulling out as much of our income as we can, or of our initial equity as we can. Yeah, so these are all values. The last thing, just as a rule of thumb, you're going to want to put about $250 a unit. That's just something that's standard. Everyone adjusts this number, but $250 unit is what I've seen a lot in reserves, and you just want to make sure you have some sort of backup contingency in case you lose out on it. All right, so now you have a T12. I'm just going to go over this briefly. Again, with the T12, you fill these out from a sheet that the seller gives you. And you can track this all along the way, but you have to be able to recognize, like, all right, water, sewer should actually be 11,000, not 22,000, like it says in the OM, right? You don't really get a feel for the numbers until you start underwriting a bunch of these in the target area that you're trying to go for. And again, and then you're going to double check the rent roll, right? You want to make sure, they're making the actual money that you're looking for. This is kind of hodgepodge together as an example, but once you're all done, I'm just going to wrap this up, finish this as much as I can. You get this summary sheet, and this gives you the easiest way to see, will this project work or not? For me now, I'm taking passive investors. So now I have to see, like, how do I make money, and how do I give money back? And like, is this worth it for people to invest? Is this a good project that I would even want, like, say, my mom to invest in, right? So all that said, I have like my year 1, year 2, year 3, out to year 7. This is my income, right? For the first 2 years, it's lower. It starts at 208,000, and then by year 3, it finishes at 300,000, right? And then after that, it stabilizes around 300. Then I subtract my vacancy costs, right? And my bad debt and all these concessions that I might make, but not in the area that we're looking in. And then I have to figure out, my payroll costs. There's not really payroll. We pay a property manager. That comes out of like the property management fees. So these are part of the T12 expenses that we listed earlier, right? And now I have an NOI. I have a net operating income. So my NOI went from 105,000 to 176,000, right? So essentially my valuation goes up by like 40% just on this alone. If all else stays the same, right? My cap rate stays the same. So that doesn't account for the amount of money I spent to repair and remodel it, but this is like, this will give you an idea of like what I can make on the sale. So once I finish with my debt payments, then I get a total sale price in year 7 around 1.4 million, not sale price, sorry, an exit sale income that I generate. So my sale price was actually 2.6, but after I pay off my loans, I make about like 1.4. So this gives me, the total final valuations and I get an idea of what my returns are actually going to look like. So this project, I got a 2.1 equity multiple out the end of it. 2.1 means for the equity multiple, I start with $100 invested. I exit with $210, right? Annual return, that's a simple interest rate. That's like 11% every year is my cash flow. If my investors want an 8% preferred return, that means I need to pay them out this 8% number every single year. And if it's higher than 8%, I can probably pay that back, which is why you want to check over every single year, right? So this is like 57,000, 60,000, 90,000, right? This is over the, I think I was raising like 500,000 for this, and then times 0.08, so that's equal to 40,000 a year, right? So if there's any of these years where it's less than 40,000, it might not meet that preferred payment, right? That's where you run the risk, and you should double check when you're underwriting syndicators, like, can they actually make these preferred returns? Then, yeah, annual rate of return, simple interest. With this calculator, it calculates the cash flow and then how much you get once you average it out over the total on top of the sale. This is what I was talking about earlier, right? You have your sale proceeds income, and then you have your rental income. Rental income is 11%. And then once you include the sale, that's like 15.6. IRR, internal rate of return, that is essentially an accumulated interest rate that Jason was mentioning earlier. IRR, you start with like it's 1.15 to the power of 7 is your actual return, technically. That's kind of how it calculates it. And it appreciates more money up front, and it reduces the value of properties further and further down. And this is how you're supposed to calculate it when you have like different distributions at different times. This is like a thing for, I guess, advanced investors. But the big thing you're going to want to care about is, what's my equity multiple, right? So this is actually a fake version of the project. The project that we do have is actually closer to 2.3, I think, in terms of equity return multiple. Yeah, 2.3 in terms of equity multiple over 7 years. So the reason being is that every Excel sheet is different, and you need to learn how the Excel sheet works. So this is where the trick comes in. We know is actually going to be a pro forma where the first 2 years are still rent controlled. So it should not have increased that quickly for year 1 and year 2, right? It only should adjust in year 3. So year 1 and year 2, I had to hard code and readjust the numbers so it matched what the outcome is actually going to look like. Our returns will actually look even higher once year 4 happens and we refinance sooner, right? You actually get your equity back in year 4 instead of the sale in year 7. But, you know, conservative estimate, you don't know what's going to look like in year 4. But that's kind of like the worst case scenario is we stick to the loan and we write it out for like 7 years without changing to like the better agency loan. So when you look at a project like this, this one is where it's the riskiest because we actually in year 2 we stopped taking interest only, right? It's only 25,000, but that's where the interest reserve comes in. We have that year of interest reserve, and it pays off for some of that preferred return. And then by year 3, we like stabilize, and you know, our income readjusts. But I misunderstood what Jason was saying earlier. So for certain projects, it'll be 12%, but if you don't meet certain requirements, if the vacancy is too low, it actually, the interest reserve requirement is starting to go up to like 18 to 24 months. So that's what we encountered with this project. Yeah, so I misunderstood what Jason was saying earlier. But yeah, that's essentially this project. I stepped you through everything that I did, and hopefully y'all know how to do it now. And I'm gonna start taking questions. Cool. Wow, my throat is super dry. All right. Okay. Let's see. Expense ratio is something important. It's usually going to be 45 to 55%. So for this project, let's see, yeah, expense ratio was like 54%. And then after year one, I put it at 60%, just in case we ended up paying more for the expense ratio. But usually something well run is going to be between 45 and 55 is what I've seen. Yeah, so where's the 10K that the previous owners owed in utilities to the city? So that's actually under the, should be under the T12. I put this at 11,000, but I actually should have left this at 22,000. And then this is the T12. It shows you your expenses for the first year. And then when I go on my dashboard, I want to put 11,000 in my stabilized utilities. So this will include gas, electricity, heat. I did the math earlier, but essentially this is like what it is once after year one, everything is fixed and stabilized. Sure. Okay. When exiting, do you see cap rate the same? Yeah. So you should assume that the cap rate is higher. That's just the standard because you don't want to think that your cap rate is going to go lower because then you're just projecting for a higher sales price. And that isn't always the case. You should readjust and reevaluate for the actual possible valuation. So it's pretty standard for people to actually go higher by about like 0.05% for each year that you hold on to it. But here I went up like 0.5% versus what average C class in Chicago is, just in case. Okay, so I'm assuming worst case scenario and actual underwriting only differs in the numbers punched in. Yeah, you can go actual underwriting. I had a different spreadsheet for that, but like I wanted to assume the worst case because you want to under promise, over deliver when you're working with investors. And you also want to take care of yourself. You want a little more of a budget room in case you screw up. Cool. Thank you. Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, Jason is even more conservative. He goes up by 0.1% for each year. All right. So, okay. I can send out a book later on for commercial real estate for everyone interested. Yeah, so a lot of this stuff might be not too easy to understand if you're hitting it right off the bat. But the big thing to remember is what is my sale income and then what is like my rental income every single month. And if you have those two understandings decently well, then you understand from the sales side how much total money you're making, and then from the rental income side, can they actually perform on the project, or can you like survive on this project? So the worst case scenario is like you end up not having enough money and you have to go back to investors and be like, can you let me borrow some more, right? That's where the risk comes in. All right. But that is, okay, so there's a list of different cities you can research in. I follow this guy, Neil Bawa. He talks a lot about these data metric ways to look up different cities that are interesting and cool in. Like what I showed you earlier is like a thing you do one time at the beginning, right? You spend like maybe 2 weeks really getting to know a city, and then you're good for the rest of your life almost, as long as you keep like a good pulse on what's happening in there. So if you really love, say, Houston, you should go through the steps I talked about, figure out the crime rate, figure out all the underwriting, and then keep track of the city afterwards. If you do all the work up front, it only takes about like 1 to 2 weeks. Then you'll be able to figure out, all right, in the future, how do I plug it into an Excel sheet and give the actual output that I want to see. In terms of websites, yeah, Neil Bawa has a site, and then Subtle Asian Real Estate is also making a site, so we can hopefully help you guys pick markets better. No, this is all right. This is my website. Yeah. Well, while everyone's here, we're creating a directory and trying to help pretty much have a place for us to have stored content instead of just constantly like having people repost stuff on the website. So that's kind of the goal. Keep an eye out, and hopefully we can have people talk about their market soon as well. Oh, here's one. Real Wealth Network is a good way to look it up. So I follow them sometimes. They have this site called for featured real estate markets, and they like accumulate some of the data that I just talked about. So for example, oh yeah, you love Atlanta, Georgia, right? They'll give you all the metro information, median household income, unemployment rate, et cetera, et cetera. But again, this is still on like a larger city level. You will eventually still have to dig down into each neighborhood to figure out which neighborhood works best for you, right? So like you still need to do all those parts that I just mentioned. Oh, I didn't realize Atlanta was losing jobs each month. All right, but either way, that is something for you to like look into. Cool. Any other questions?
Hey Nelson, this is Peter. Can you just speculate on the work at a home trend?
Oh, I mean, that's
versus investing in
yeah, that
home
one.
setups that cater to those.
Yeah, that one's pretty simple. If you look at the data, everyone wants bigger backyards now. Cities in the downtown area are losing out on a lot of money because they were projecting, rents to grow for 4 or 5% every single year in San Francisco, right? And like you're waiting for this imaginary growth that you've seen in the past sometimes that won't be there in the future. So I showed you like 2% growth, et cetera. So that, assuming your income goes up 2% over every year, your initial investment is say 25%. That means the valuation of your property has gone up in comparison to your equity by around 8%. I know this math sucks. I hate saying this and it comes out of my mouth and I know people are tuning out, but the way to think about it is you are taking a loan and you're leveraging it. So when you earn money, that is not based on the total value of the property. You're basing it on the original equity that you put down, right? So a 25% down payment means every increase of 1% in the property is a 4% return to your actual valuation. So a lot of these downtown apartment complexes that were projecting 5%, 6% return in San Francisco, they have seen a 20% drop in their actual returns. So those people who invest in those apartments are about to be blown out of the water and lose a lot of it. But people in Austin, people in places where there's like the South, where there's a lot of space for cheap, they have seen record rent. Even downtown Austin is actually struggling right now. I have a friend whose dad is like a major developer, and he was having trouble filling up his like downtown apartment complex, but he has this 300 unit out in the suburbs of Round Rock, and he said it's flown off the shelves faster than he's ever seen. So for him, his valuations will stay up. And so in order to predict the COVID market, it's very difficult. But right now, what it sounds like is people are looking back into the cities and it would actually be the best time now to buy into something within a downtown area. Why? Because we've hit the bottom, I think. Q1 is like probably the worst a lot of these apartment people have ever encountered, because they were, one, not expecting this many people to leave like the downtown areas, which is where everyone wants to live. Then on top of that, they now have to have a valuation that makes sense, because they probably went through it with investors. A lot of these people who invest in these like high rises, they don't buy into it themselves, right? They buy and sell through like limited partners who put money and trust them, but they just didn't see the market completely turning in this way. And also they maybe didn't look at the underwriting, and the guy said 5% increases forever, right? So that's kind of the thing you want to look out for. It doesn't actually matter where you're going in the future with COVID. You just want to make sure, are these people projecting the correct numbers? But yeah, long story short is, COVID wise, there's been talks amongst the commercial real estate people, and there's going to be a lot of foreclosures in the next year. So if you guys have the capital for it, or if you know somebody in like the commercial side, you have a lot of opportunity there, because it's hitting like the bottom. However, on the residential side, a lot of people are saying that's actually rebounded already for like single family homes and like small stuff that everyone can sort of buy and purchase. So, but that was, I was talking to somebody in Texas about that. So I don't know, they might be biased. We don't know until the foreclosures, those actually end, forbearance actually like comes off and it's like in full swing, because it's only been 4 days so far into that, right? We don't actually, we don't actually see these homes coming back on the market and people trying to, make that money work for them. All I've seen right now is that people are paying the rent, and it's somewhat stable in multifamily, surprisingly, once you leave the major downtown areas. 2K stimulus checks. Yeah, that's true. That's true. All right. Any other questions? Cool. With that, it's been an hour. I don't want to hold you guys longer. I'm going to call it a night. And thank you all for being here. And I will message you, Nancy, later about books that I've used in the past.
Thanks.
Well, I mean, we are starting a book club, so maybe that might be the next place to go. Yeah. Okay, let me jot down these names.
Yeah, so we can do a post if you're just sending out book titles.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, this is a future readings, right? And the book club.
Yeah, that works too.
All right, cool. Have a good night, y'all. I'm going to end this now.
Good night.